started with all right. Today's is day 17, Luke 18 to 21. Let's go. Luke 18, we have this persistent widow parable where, the lesson is that we need to be consistent in our prayer, not unwavering, not doubtful, because the woman in this prayer, she was dealing with a non-God-fearing man, yet he ruled in her favor. And so us being faithful to a God who is faithful and just, how much more will he not answer our prayers? That's the lesson of that one. We have the Pharisee and the tax collector, and how this Pharisee is so proud of, not being like the world, and he fasts and he gives and he tithes. He's not adulterous, and he compares himself to this, not like this tax collector over here, but this tax collector understood the holiness of God. He was afar off. He wasn't, so arrogant and presumptuous as the Pharisee, and he didn't even look his eyes up to heaven, but he beat his chest and said, "Have mercy on me, for I'm a sinner." And that is the heart of a disciple. That is the heart of us. It is, again, it's not about, us being perfect as Christians, but serving the one who is perfect and believing in the one who is perfect. Because, we are sinners. We mess up on the daily, on the reg. We also have the rich, the rich ruler tells, that's two separate things. The rich ruler, and how he, again, I mentioned in the last video about giving or about possessions, and this rich young ruler is told to give up his possessions. And so how crazy it is, we assert sometimes that we ask for all these blessings of God, and we use Old Testament passages to assert that, well, God gave Abraham all these things, and David was wealthy, and Solomon, nobody had more riches like him. And we take that and we our eyes glaze over, like God is an ATM. But people who had money, he told them to sell it. And that's not to say that we can't have that we don't work or anything like that. I mean, working for your own is biblical, but to use God to seek after your finances is just ridiculous. It's just not biblical. I mean, I don't know. Again, he's always talking about getting rid of it. And Jesus didn't even have a home place to lay his head. He didn't even have a house. And so I'm not saying that we need to get rid. I guess I kind of am. Yeah, you should probably sell some of your possessions and help the poor. That's the response, and that's the thing, though. That's not that he told them to do that. That's just the response of the people. They heard the gospel, and they would realize, I need to get rid of this. I need to do right. I need to reconcile. I need to restore. I need to sell my possessions, and I need to give it to the poor. And that's what people did. And so where am I at? I don't know. We also have him telling his death, that he'll die and, given over in so many days, so we rise from the dead. And also we see him healing the blind beggar. And this blind beggar, he was, again, like the woman, he was very persistent in how he approached Jesus. He would call out to him. People will try to turn him away, but, Jesus ended up, what it is can I do for you? And he ends up restoring him. Chapter 19, we have Jesus and Zacchaeus. I don't know if I said that right, Zacchaeus. And this man, he's seeing Jesus come. He wants to be close to Jesus, but he's a sinner. So what does he do? Is he kind of goes ahead of him, gets in a tree, and Jesus calls him down and says, "Hey, I'm going to have dinner with you." And the Pharisees judge him, saying, like, how can you eat with this sinner? But it's just that verse 10. I love it. Son of Man, he came to seek and to save the lost. That's why he came. And so Jesus is here for those kinds of people. And thank God, I am one of those people. We have the 10 minas parable, which is some kind of talent or money. And they were all giving, kind of, like the 10 talents one. They're all giving so much denomination of this currency, and they're asked to, the master goes away, and they're asked to produce based off of that. And some of them do, and then some of them don't. They get judged. They didn't do it. They weren't doing their job, essentially. And so, I have better notes than that. It's about the kingdom. It's just about the kingdom. Is this the one? I'm sorry, my handwriting is terrible. Triumphal entry, Jesus Christ entering on a colt. The disciples, not the disciples. The Pharisees always hating. the crowds are cheering, and then the Pharisees or the scribes are like, hey, can you not tell them to stop cheering for you, that you're not the blessed one, the king, the one that comes in the name of the Lord? And Jesus is like, even if they weren't here, these stones would cry out. Like, God would make these stones cry out. Like, it's this is what it is. He's telling them this is the reality. I love it. Let's see. Jesus Christ at the end of that chapter 19, he cleans out the temple. Prophecy saying that, that it'll be called a house of prayer, but you will make it into a den of robbers. And we have people hustling in the temple, selling sacrifices and getting one over on the people. And so Jesus Christ, he comes and he deals with that. He makes God's place holy. He separates it. He sanctifies it. Luke chapter 20. We have Jesus Christ's authority challenge, and they try to trap him, and Jesus ends up challenging them back and saying, like, okay, well, was John's baptism from heaven? And they kind of get within themselves, and they come to the conclusion that, we're not going to say anything. And so Jesus is like, since you're not going to say anything, then I'm not going to say anything. And since John the Baptist, he asserted of the authority of Jesus Christ of God, and yet the Pharisees weren't a part of that baptism. And instead of being truthful, the Pharisees decided to lie and said they didn't know, but really they feared the men. They feared people, that they'd be stoned because they received John the Baptist as a prophet. And so that's how they challenged it. And Jesus, again, answering a fool to their folly, he answered them to their folly. We have the parable of the wicked tenants, and this one is about essentially the history. I mean, it almost looks like the whole Bible to me in one parable, and how he's sending all his servants to come to these. The master leaves, and he's sending people to his vineyard to get some fruit, but the people there kept beating them and killing them and sending them back. And so when you look at the Old Testament, we have God constantly sending prophets to the people, telling them to repent, telling them to live holy, telling them to sanctify themselves. And yet they beat them and they kill them, and they throw out all these prophets. And then eventually he's like, okay, you know what? God is like, eventually I'm going to send my son. They're going to respect him. He's a representation of me. He has my authority. Surely they'll listen to him. What are they going to do? What do they do instead? No, they kill him, and in their minds they conspire, and they think we'll receive the inheritance. And so they kill him, and what do you think the father's going to do? Oh man, I guess, sorry guys, my bad. Shouldn't have sent anybody to come take what was mine. No, he's going to come back and he's going to judge. And so essentially that parable is the story of the Bible. We have the Old Testament prophets, we have the New Testament Son, and we have Revelation and God's judgment in the end. Pretty awesome. We have paying taxes, render to Caesar's what is Caesar's and to God's what is God's. They're trying to trap him again. And I think, again, out of that, make sure you pay your taxes. We're in the world system, we have to do it. Nothing wrong with that. It sucks, but whatever. We have the Sadducees asking about the resurrection because they didn't believe in the resurrection, and this is in the other Gospels, and so if you watch other videos, I went over that too, but they didn't believe in the resurrection, and so they kind of come up with a scenario, and Jesus is just like, okay, you guys don't understand. In the resurrection, there's no marrying, nobody will be given into marriage or be married. They'll be like the angels, and they'll be as the Son of God. They'll be the Son of God, sons of God, and so that's just he's just teaching them. They just really didn't know. We also have who's Christ? Is he the Son of David or is he the Son of God? He's quoting from the Psalms, and how David the Lord said to my Lord, and so he's like, well how could he be his son if he calls him Lord? And so that's just that's why he's kind of questioning them. That piece actually seems kind of just juxtaposed in there, and then because he continues on and talks about being aware of the scribes and their hypocrisy and the things that they don't do those. Don't be hypocrites. Essentially, 11. It's not 11, but beware of the scribes. Luke 21. This is in comparison to Matthew 24 and Mark 13, and it talks about a lot of the end timesy stuff. But first off, there's a story about the widow's offering and how God sees so much favor or so much, it's just so precious in the eyes of God to see somebody give out of their poverty. I've never really experienced it, but I've had friends, and they were, they went to like another country, and they'd be with little kids, and they just had bread, and this is the only bread they're gonna get, and this little kid will share their piece of bread with them, and it's just, it just moves us, and it moves God. And this woman, she had like 2 pennies, but it's all she had, and so she gave out of her poverty, and she gave everything she had, and that is the type of giving that we should seek. If we don't do it, if we are not like that, we should seek to give that way, to recognize what's God's, and to recognize also, helping other people. It's a hard, I know, that's hard. We also have the foretelling of the destruction of the temple, which was fulfilled in 70 A.D., and not one stone is left. Jesus foretells that, and it happens. So, there goes some, you want some evidence, there goes some evidence. We also have him foretelling of wars and persecution, which has happened. Christians essentially were persecuted all the way up to the 300s. I'm talking just, killing them everywhere. Nero, one of the most infamous, I suppose. He killed Christians. He put them on stakes, like not like like a stake, and have them decorated in his. He'd have dead Christians decorated in his. His garden. This is the kind of persecution that was happening in those times. They were very creative and very sick too. We also have the destruction of Jerusalem, and how the Gentiles will be trampling on it, and Jerusalem is just a hotbed, of trampling, and this is going to be like that until the Son of Man comes back. We also have him returning, and one of the signs of him returning is the celestial bodies, the heavens changing, and that is when he'll be back. And we also have the fig tree, and how, when these things change, when the leaves change in the fig tree, a certain season is coming, and likewise, when you see these signs coming, behold, the Son of Man is coming back soon. And so that sums up these chapters, and that's it. So, again, I know it's so much information, but stay at it, be faithful. Thank you for watching. God bless.